Welcome back to Drive Your Thoughts podcast. I'm your host, Master Coach Carrie Marshall, and it's time to go after those goals.
Yeah, whether ready or not, life's coming hard, no breaks, no stop. And if you put me on the spot, don't get it twisted, I never drop. If you feel a bit out of control and out the box, here's a way that you could drive your thoughts. Turn this podcast on, it's a lock. Carrie Marshall on the clock.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It is one of my favorite podcast episodes to record today. It is book review day. All right, so we're going to do something a little bit different today because as I'm recording this podcast, it is the beginning of summer. Today is actually the last day of my kids' last day of school. And so I've been thinking a lot about summer reads. I know that for me, this is the bulk time that I get all of my reading done is during the summer. I have a lot of downtime, spend a lot of time by the pool, by the beach. And so I read a lot during these times. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of do things a little bit different. In the past, we've done a lot of personal development books, but today I want to give you 2 recommendations for fictional books that I think are really great. And then we're also going to talk about another book that is coming out really soon and why you want to make it a new summer read for you. So the first book that I want to talk about is called Homecoming, and it is by Kate Morton. Kate Morton is by far my favorite fictional author. I have adored every single one of her books. But let's talk specifically about Homecoming. First off, this has been a long time coming. We, as her fans, have been waiting for Kate to write a book for some time. But here's what I love about Kate Morton is that she does not rush the process. She really allows herself some space to think about the process and come up with the story and all of that. So she's not one of those authors that's going to, number one, either get a ghostwriter to write the bulk of her book and then just put her name on it, which happens a lot. Or number 2, she's not going to be your summer read where she's coming out with a new book like every 6 months, which is also what authors do. No shame to either one of those processes, but I will tell you that you can tell by her storytelling ability that really taking your time to kind of flesh out the story and where it takes place and everything is really beneficial. So for Homecoming is about a woman that lives in England and then she needs to come home because her grandma is sick and in the hospital. But the great thing is it kind of bounces back and forth between 2 stories. It bounces back to the woman's story, but then it also goes to 1959. So kind of a little bit around when the grandma was born. And it takes place in Australia, which is really fun. So if you are into kind of a little bit, it's not historical, but it is a little bit of that historical nod, you're going to really love this book. It is kind of a mystery as well. In the 1959 story, an entire family dies. The mom and all of her children die except for the baby that goes missing and then they find later passed away. And so it kind of goes back and forth between well, who did it? What happened back then? Why does it matter, this present day story? And how does it all tie in? There's a lot to do with the house that the grandma lives in. And so it's really fascinating to read this story. And it helps you to get lost in the story. And we're going to kind of take a little turn now and talk about the next story. And I'll tell you why we're going to talk about fiction and why it's so important. But I want you to just kind of hang on for a minute because the next book is a lot different than the first book. The next book is not new. It's been out forever. There's actually a movie about it, and maybe some of you have read it. But the next book is called World War Z. Who's heard of it? It is by Max Brooks, and it is about basically the zombie apocalypse. Now, I just read this book for the first time. I hadn't read it before. I'd heard a lot, and it's been on my to-read book for a long time. But I just finished it the other night, and I'll tell you why I wanted to put it on your list for a read for this summer. So I'll tell you the premise of it. It says the zombie war came unthinkably close to eradicating humanity. And so then it talks about Max Brooks, driven by the urgency of preserving the acid etched firsthand experience of the survivors from the apocalyptic years, traveled across the United States of America and throughout the world from decimated cities to talk to people and recorded the testimonies of men and women. Okay, so the reason that I love this book so much, I've seen the movie before, but I loved how Max Brooks talks and thinks and dreams and comes up with the story of it all. So every single chapter is like that oral history of like, how did it start and what had happened here and what happened there. He's creating, right? He's creating a basically, okay, post-zombie, the zombies come and they almost eradicate humans. Number one, how did they get here? How did it spread? How did they figure out how to kill them? How did people survive? It is so many different moving pieces and parts that you really start to see an author's way of thinking through like an entire world and what that world would look like. So for instance, one of the very first things, I think it's like close to like page 40 or something, he talks about how one of the ways that this zombie virus spread is through a heart transplant on the black market. I mean, I read that chapter and I was like, this is brilliant. How does he think of this? So here's really two very, very different fictional books. And so I want to kind of talk about why fiction is so important for us. Now, everybody likes to read different types of fictional books. And so that's why I wanted to kind of give two very different types of books. And honestly, if you have a genre that you like and you want a book recommendation, come over to Drive Your Thoughts Coaching on Instagram. Please DM me because it delights me to no end when I have people ask me for book recommendations. So, but I wanted to give these two different genres because I think that there is so much power that we're missing when we're not reading fictional books. And so I wanted to kind of mention a couple of books that maybe you could go and explore because here's what I'm seeing. Now, I'm actually seeing some of the fictional books start to do this as well. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But what I'm seeing is that we are starting to have a shorter and shorter attention span. We want things to happen right now, right? We watch reels, we watch TikToks, we want, our YouTubes, even our podcasts, we want to be short and sweet. And if they're not, guess what we can do? If we're listening to Joe Rogan's, then we just put it on 3 times speed and we speed it up so that we can get through it faster. That's the one thing that I love about fiction. And even fiction, right? You have Audible and other things that you can speed up. But the thing that I like about fiction that has been written well is that you have to slow down to enjoy it and to take it in. So you have to be willing to a couple things. You have to be willing to kind of give up your what would I call it? Maybe your guard. You need to let your guard down and allow imagination to happen as well. So it doesn't matter whether you're going to 1959 in Adelaide, Australia, or you're going to post the zombie war in World War Z. Both of those are asking you to take your guard down for just a minute so that you can get into the story and actually help the author get you to where they're trying to take you. So that's the first thing, is that I think that it does allow us to be able to take our guard down and become a little bit more creative and imagination a little bit more when we can actually read fictional books. The second one that I already mentioned was it helps us to slow down. We have to be willing to kind of come into the story and we have to be willing to do it. You can listen to it on Audible 3 times speed, but then you're missing out on some of the actual acting and things that are happening within even the story as it's being told to you. So whether you're on Audible or you're reading the book, I really want to encourage you to listen to fiction at 1 or 1.5. That might drive some of you crazy. But fiction is a way that we unlock creativity. I had one of my clients that was really struggling with coming up with ideas for his company. He is one of the COOs of a really big company. And he said, we're being asked to come to the table with all of these different ideas, and I feel stagnant. I don't know what to do here. And so as we talked about it and coached through that mindset of being stagnant around ideas, the one thing that I mentioned was, I'd love for you to just pick up a fictional book this week. Just find something that you're interested in and read it. And so he went to kind of Louis L'Amour because he loves that kind of old school cowboy feel. And so he's like, I haven't read a fiction book in years. Like, I've kind of said that they're not useful, they're not beneficial. And I said, listen, you're kind of stagnant with your creativity right now. So I'd love for you to just let your guard down, let your imagination flow, get yourself in the story, and just allow yourself to love it and be entertained by it and just get yourself there. And he said, okay, I can definitely do that. So went away for a long weekend, read his Louis L'Amour book, came back, and he was like, Carrie, you will not believe what happened. And I said, let me guess, you read your whole book and allowed yourself to just be in it. And then somewhere in between, an idea for your company popped up. And he's like, yes, how did you know? Because that's why our imagination is there. That's why we have to, as adults especially, learn to unlock that imagination. And fictional books is a really great way of doing that. So the other thing that fictional books does is it gives us a place to actually just check out from our life. We don't want to do it all of the time, but a lot of us have a lot of pressure and anxiety in our lives. Like my client, he was feeling a lot of pressure from work. There were a lot of deadlines happening. There was a lot of expectations that he just felt like he was at a hurdle that he couldn't get over. And honestly, that's part of being able to read fictional books, is that we're able to just pause and just allow ourselves to kind of check out and go somewhere else. We talk about buffering, where we kind of check out of our life, and this could be a form of buffering, honestly, but it's one of the most healthy ways of buffering. Much rather you sit down to read a book and check out than go and drink or get high unintentionally. And so I just want you to just kind of realize that there is a way of managing stress and healthily checking out of your life through fiction and things like that. The other thing that it does is it helps us create possibility. Maybe the World War Z book is a little out of the realm of possibility, but the cool thing is that it kind of talks to you about what if there was a virus that spread? What would people do and what places would survive? And so as much as it is very, very fictional, there's also this place of being able to kind of step into it and be what would we do? So that's another reason that I love actually reading fictional books, is I think that it gives you a glimpse into possibility with other things. I think it's really important, if you are going to read fictional books, that you read a very big array of fictional books. And this is what I'm doing with my kids right now, is that, I have kids that like certain types of books, which is good. I love that. I'll always go back to a Kate Morton book myself, like that. Like I said, kind of that fictional mystery strung through historical time frames. I like that. And I just love the way that she writes them. But you get stuck reading the same genre of book. And then what you do is you actually take your creativity and your imagination and you box it up. And that's one of the things that we don't want to do. So if you're really into reading those summer, super fast romance novel, the Colleen Hoover type books, I really want to encourage you to step outside of that and read a historical fiction, or go into the sci-fi genre, or, there's so many different ways that you can go in avenues. But don't block yourself in just because you like to read that one thing and it's fast and it's fun and it's, whatever. I really want you to start to read different types of genres, because it is very helpful for you to then see possibility, unlock your potential. So the last book that I wanted to talk about is one that hasn't even come out yet. There is a book that's going to be coming out. And because I do own a publishing house, I get to kind of know the first things about books and when they're going to come out. So this book is going to be coming out, and it is a self-development book, but it really focuses on one thing in particular. Now, I think I'm going to have the author on here, so we're not going to tease it out too much. But what I want you to know is I have been reading the book and the transcript right now, the draft, and it has been really fun to just be able to see that really you can focus on something so small that can make such an impact in your life. And so we're going to talk to the author. We're going to talk about the book itself, but I want you to really think for yourself about if I were to ask you to write a book or you were to write a book yourself, what would be your summer read? What would be the thing that you would either want to tell people that you're really good at, like something that you have a ton of experience on, or something that you'd want to pass down to your kids? So this is the challenge that I want to have here on our book recommendation podcast today is I really want you to think about you, about your life. I love to kind of talk to people about this because so often we kind of just downplay the experiences and the expertise that we have in our life. And we don't think about where to record it or write it or to pass it down to the next generation. And so that's my challenge for you today is I want you to think about your summer read. What would it be? I hope that it's something that is going to spark some type of creativity in you. And if nothing comes to mind, then really I want to encourage you to go pick up some books so that you can kind of start to see whether they're personal development, autobiographical, fiction. It doesn't really matter. I want you to just think about the next phase for your life and what you would want to tell people. So my book recommendations today, World War Z by Max Brooks, and then also Homecoming by Kate Morton. And then my last recommendation is really think to yourself about what you would want to write. I have an author that's going to be coming on talking about what sparked his creativity to write this book that is one of the most powerful books that I've ever read. So I'm excited for you to all get to meet him and talk about the book. So really come over to Drive Your Thoughts Coaching. Ask me if you need a book recommendation. And also, you know me, if you have a book recommendation, please, please, please come and give it to me because I'm reading 100 books this year and another great book recommendation would be awesome. So we'll catch you next time. Bye. Thanks for listening to this podcast episode. If you're ready to get in the driver's seat of your own life, you can come and follow me at Drive Your Thoughts Coaching on Instagram, or come and see more ways to work with me at driveyourthoughts.com.
Yeah, whether ready or not, life's coming hard, no breaks, no stop. And if you put me on the spot, don't get it twisted, I never drop. If you feel a bit out of control and out the box, here's a way that you could drive your thoughts. Turn this podcast on, it's a lock. Carrie Marshall on the clock.